it all started about 5 or 6 years ago when a group called Equality Labs, which says that they are here to protect and help the marginalized communities like Dalits. They started with a survey. The survey basically asked whether they would actually, whether Dalits have experienced caste discrimination in the United States. And there were a lot of issues with the survey, but nobody cared about methodology. What was important was the survey was used as a propaganda tool to launch an attack on the Hindu American and the Indian American community. And it was first given authenticity by Representative Pramila Jayapal, where she held a congressional briefing on Capitol Hill about this survey. So if you think this is a ridiculous claim, this is what's going on in universities. Just 3 days ago, someone actually mentioned to me that she was canceled on campus for hosting by the DEI. This is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department of this university. She was canceled for talking about Hinduphobia and challenging the caste issues. She was canceled. So our students on campuses are subjected to this attack, and they are scared. They're shy of talking about it because they don't have the information. So I'm really happy that Rajiv ji has come up with this primer that will give them that information to fight back.
So first I want to thank Nikunj. I think you're getting better and better as time goes by. Nikunj is one of the early persons in our journey in the 90s, I think. He was a student at Rutgers, and I was just beginning, going around giving these talks. Nobody willing to listen. In those years, the first 10 years, not only was there no positive support, Hindu temples would refuse to let me speak because it would be a controversy. So many people would say, okay, let's speak Chicago, LA, Chinmay temple, Chinmay mission here. And they would politely say, no, we'll pay and rent a school hall somewhere, something like that. They were embarrassed, our own people, because they had such a deep inferiority complex. They didn't want to stand up, and they themselves didn't have the wherewithal and courage to stand up and speak. But not only that, they did not want someone else to do it because by association they would be considered guilty. So we've come a long way, and it's thanks to people like Nikunj and various others. Now today, when I've written 13 books, the lady said 9, and I'm going to write another 20 in the next 5-6 years, put out, because so many of them are almost done. So many of the books are like 95-98% done and trying to really perfect it. I've just kept them, but now I'm going to crank them out. This year is our 30th anniversary, so we are celebrating in many different ways, and Nikunj is part of that. So we'll put out maybe 5 or 6 books this year, and one will be on different parts of our accomplishments, different journeys, different conferences, different frameworks and paradigms we've introduced. So we'll do a lot of that. Now, this book here, Varna, Jati, Caste, which each of you should have a copy of, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I've never actually read out from a book, but I will do that. And authors often like to do that. They like to read out passages from here and there to make you familiar. And the reason I'll do that is because since each of you has a copy, this will encourage you to go and read it in more detail. So I'm going to actually, there's about 8 chapters. I'm not going to read 120 pages right now, but I'll tell you a little bit about what's in each chapter. That way you will know where to go and get information. The purpose of writing this, it's called a primer on Indian social structures. Primer meaning it's very easy. A school kid should be able to read it. You should be able to dive into a particular chapter without having to read the whole book. It's written as a reference work. So if somebody wants to say, was there always caste abuse? Well, there is a particular place where you can get information on it. Did the British invent the caste system as we currently know it? There is a place where there is information on it. Ambedkar, who was the founder of the Dalit movement in modern times, there are issues about his work and a chapter on that. So there are specifically, it's isolated places where you can get information, and therefore it's designed to be a reference book. So I will give you a quick walkthrough. The context in which this was written is a large book called Snakes in the Ganga. This is a part of that. And the context is that there is all this woke, ultra-left stuff going on in Harvard, in media, in various places. DEI is a part of that. Critical race theory is a part of that. Cancel culture is a part of that. So in that context, we have been framed as oppressors using caste as the weapon against us. That's the context in which we are having to defend ourselves. Now, it explains, first of all, what is the Hindu metaphysics so that you understand where Varna and Jati come from. We don't have caste, we have Varna and Jati. So it gives you a very simple, easy to read background on what is Varna, what is Jati. It explains that these are actually ways of preserving diversity. It's not against diversity, it is for diversity. Because rather than a homogeneous society, a society where different people have different talents and they all work together in one social ecosystem is a healthier society. So it explains the original purpose of having Varna as a very natural thing. You see, if you look at nature, you don't have homogeneity. You don't have all the trees same height or all the flowers same color. You don't have all the dogs the same kind of dogs. I mean, everything in nature has got so much diversity, diversity within diversity within diversity. You look at geography, it's diverse. You look at climate every day, every moment is changing. So that is sort of a principle of nature. And therefore, it's reasonable that human beings also will have diversity. Now, I was sitting in one of these Ivy League type places where they were saying that the Indians doing very well in math and science and capturing a lot of seats in places like Harvard is because of elitism and oppressiveness and a kind of privileged background. So the equity means that equity is different from equality. Equality says everybody is equal, you compete, somebody will win, somebody will not win, but everybody gets equal chance. Equity is different. Equity says that's not good enough because Sandeep came from a privileged background, so he has better math. I don't have as good math, not my fault, because my heritage did not teach me that. I'm coming from a poor place. Whatever the reason is, maybe his brain is better for math because he ate better food. I was not given that good food, like that. So we must be given the same result whether we deserve it or not. Whether we deserve it or not. So this means equity is a principle which is against meritocracy. That's a very serious matter. So I was having this discussion, and just to show you how shallow these people are, they run away when you put an argument. So they said we want equity so that all the intakes are as per race, as per race. If Indians have 2% of the race in America, then they should get 2% of the seats. 2% of jobs in technology, 2% of doctors. Everybody should be in proportion. That's the argument of equity. That is really what DEI is ultimately going for. Ultimately, they're going for that. So I said, what about the fact that there's a room like this, 3 times as many people. I'm the only Indian. I'm picking my hands up, and I always do this and I get in trouble. But I do it anyway. So I said, what about the fact that in sports, blacks are overrepresented? Blacks are overrepresented. And Indians are underrepresented. So I feel that blacks have oppressed me so that I cannot be doing well in basketball. I think that the rules are different. So for me, the basket should be lower because I'm shorter. And for the blacks, the bursary should be higher. Just like exactly the argument they're giving for math. Exact argument they're giving for math. They want to handicap the Asians have to achieve more to get in, whereas somebody else has to achieve less. And they all stood there. Nobody had an answer to this. I said, will you accept that the Olympic Games should give medals based on, we have 1/6 of the world is Indians, we should get 1/6 of the gold medals. Whether we deserve or not, we should get it. The US Olympic team should be by race. In proportion to race, they should give how many people. All the football teams and basketball teams should downsize their blacks because there are too many. All these Oscars, there are too many blacks in the Oscars. Now, this is very politically incorrect to talk like this. But they had no answer. They really, all they can do is cancel, say, oh, no, you must be Islamophobic or something like that. Some complete irrelevant thing. But they cannot argue back. The fact of the matter is, just like the physical body is not the same for everybody, some are taller, some are shorter. Indians have a higher incident of coronary disease because the veins are, the arteries are narrow. That's just the way it is. There is more tendency for glucose problems, diabetes and so on. So we have certain biological advantages, certain biological disadvantages. All the different kinds of people have like that. So if all the organs of your body are different, somebody has stronger heart, somebody has weaker, somebody has stronger lungs, pancreas, whatever, then why wouldn't the same difference and diversity also apply to the brain? I mean, brain is also an organ. So if like the rest of our physical body is so diverse, it's reasonable that in the brain, the different centers of the brain, they do different things. Some people are going to be better in one function, some people are going to be better in another function. Some people may be good at singing. Some may have better language skills. Some may be better in math. So just like we take people who are better in one sport and push them there, and somebody who's better in music, push them there, why wouldn't you do the same thing with mental faculties? Why wouldn't you say that take those people who are good in math and let them go ahead? And we need rocket scientists. And somebody else who's got some other kind of skill can be better in that. Why is diversity being denied in the name of diversity? It's very strange. So what they are doing is, they are suppressing the diversity which is natural in order to maximize the diversity by skin color. So they want to allocate positions and professions and rewards in proportion to different races and skin colors, not realizing that this will be against meritocracy, which is a principle of nature. So, the arguments given in this book, there are so many like that you can read. And you will see that the principle of diversity in Hindu culture, in Vedic culture, is a far richer and philosophically more sound principle than this new kind of idea of diversity that they are peddling. So then I also have things very useful, I think, like tables. So here's a table on page 15, which is Vedic civilization, Western civilization. And it compares ideas, different ideas are compared. So you can read all this later, but I want to give you a quick tour. Now, some common misunderstandings about the caste system that you need to know, explained here. One is that caste is equated with Varna and Jati, which is incorrect. And it is considered, second point is, it is considered that caste, even as caste in the modern sense, is always abusive, which is not true, because we give you plenty of examples, plenty of counter examples where Shudras have had kings and dynasties, where we've had very wealthy people from various Dalit communities, billionaires. There are Indian billionaires who are Dalits. And there are Indian Brahmins who are very poor people working in a temple, making barely able to make ends meet. So it is not so universal as it is made out to be. Yes, there are problems, and we need to resolve those problems, but it is not like it is presented in this whole politicization. Also, they view that the Vedic heritage is inherently casteist. So if caste is abusive, inherently, that's not true even, but if caste is inherently abusive, and this caste is inseparable from Hinduism, then the conclusion is that Hinduism has to be dismantled. Because if you want to get rid of the abuse, you cannot change caste to make it non-abusive. And it is a part of Hinduism you cannot do without. So you have to get rid of Hinduism. So all this anti-caste does not stop there. The anti-caste leads to actually Hinduphobia. Hinduism is dangerous. There are people who said the word Hinduphobia is not appropriate because there is no phobia. But if there is caste phobia, Brahmin phobia, Vedas phobia, Gurus phobia, I mean, all these are dangerous people. They're dangerous. They're dangerous to the underclass. They're oppressed. If you're called oppressor, there has to be fear of you. The phobia is definitely there because the phobia means fear. So if somebody is branded and targeted as oppressor, and on that basis he has to be banned, there have to be laws against him, the law has to go after him, well, obviously you are generating fear. The fact that we don't think it's legitimate is not the point. The point is that the people who are the political people, legal people, activists, scholars, media, they are into this. So that Hinduphobia is a real phenomenon. Our people should stop going around saying there is no such thing. Because we have Hindus going around saying there is no such thing. You see, we have Hindus who are called me up and said, there is no such thing. So then I say, okay, if there is no such thing, do you think there is caste phobia? They say, maybe, yeah. I say, okay. Then are they saying that this is inseparable from Hinduism? Yes. So that's Hinduphobia. All this Brahmin phobia, Sanskrit phobia is Hinduphobia. What else do you want? And this whole thing about now this Sri Ram temple, there are so many, like Time magazine has an article, I don't know if you've seen today, article on why it is wrong and it's all chauvinistic and dominant and abusive and so on. That is all Hinduphobia. So we do have a problem with our own people in denial. Now, as far as the misunderstandings of caste related to Varna, Jati, caste, I would like you to read the chapter called Varna, Jati, caste, that is its title. And then there is the next chapter is very interesting. It's called A Brief Social History. I decided to look at different phases of Indian history and examine what was the social structure. So I divided the Indian history into 7 phases. I won't give you all the details, but I'll tell you the 7 phases were that I have come up with. One is early Vedic. One is late Vedic and Itihasic. There are certain parts of the Rig Veda which are considered early Vedic, and then there are other Vedic things that were added later, and also the Itihas. That is the second phase. Then there is Dharma Shastra. Dharma Shastra is not just Manusmriti, but there are dozens of Dharma Shastras written by different people over a period of hundreds of years, which are codifying what they consider describing social structures. And the Dharma Shastra, many kinds of Dharma Shastras. There are some written in the north, south, here, there, at different periods. Some were written as advice to the kings. But one thing is very clear. The Dharma Shastras were not like the constitution of the country. It is not prescriptive. It is not enforced. It is like a think tank coming up with recommendations. It's more recommendations than actual law of the land. It is not like if in the Dharma Shastra it says this, then that is what the Hindus were like. That happened to be somebody's position. It's like a position paper. Some social scientist's position paper. That's what Dharma Shastra is. Manusmriti was never the law of any king in India. Until the British came and the British started enacting, translating some of the Dharma Shastras and making them into the laws of the Hindus and things like that. But prior to that, the Dharma Shastras were never enforced as the laws in India. So you need to know these things. And then after that, the 4th phase is the Muslim phase. So we have early Vedic, late Vedic and Itihasic, Dharma Shastra, then the Muslim phase. And Muslim phase disrupts social structure. So many things happen when people are finished off, when their house of worship is gone, their education system is gone. Many of people have been killed, many have been turned into slaves. They have jizya to pay. There is havoc. And you know what people do is they huddle together in the community and fight each other. When you deprive, if you take different rats in a cage and you deprive them of basic needs, they fight each other. This is true. You can do this experiment. So communities fighting each other as a result of this happens. There's jealousy, they bring each other down. So the Muslim phase created a lot of havoc in Indian social structure. Then there is European colonial rule, which codified, from Lord Risley onwards, they codified the caste system as a hierarchy. And I will come to it a little bit later, but British actually started out by saying that the Hindus don't believe in this caste hierarchy. The British themselves are saying, and we are quoting you, the British caste survey people who are doing a census, themselves writing officially, you can read those census reports, that a lot of places we go to, and we are trying to count how many people are this kind or that kind, and the people there don't believe that they are exploited and they're part of this or that hierarchy. They don't believe in it. But we have to put them in that hierarchy. And then there is post-independence. Post-independence is another phase of Indian history. I've listed as phase number 6. And that is the whole Nehruvian era, where Indians are trying to become like Europeans and all that stuff, secular, those things. And then there is the age of globalization, where in the name of globalization, a whole lot of things that were very local become, like evangelism becomes global and so on. And now I think we are entering the 8th phase, which is the phase of the Sri Ram. The Sri Ram Chandra phase is the phase of history that we are entering. And when people ask me about the Indian grand narrative, because I've been talking about the Indian grand narrative, and they said, wasn't there a grand narrative? I tell them that at one point in time, Ramayana was our grand narrative. Ramayana was our grand narrative. In every village, not only in India, but all over Asia, that was the grand narrative by which people saw who we are. That was our sense of identity in those days. So then I have a table where I look at all these 7 phases of history and I explain what was the key character, was there hierarchy, was it birth-based, were there competing economic interests, was there communal hostility, was there untouchability, and so on. So you have a very easy way of understanding at what point the problem starts. And then you can zoom in to those pages and get the references that you will need in your argument. This can be used for school kids writing articles, could be used by you to debate in your community, or go to an interview with some media and talk to them and give them this information. So that is how the thing has been organized. Now, if you look at caste and Buddhism, because the reason I picked Buddhism is Ambedkar said he's a Buddhist, but one of the points I make is he didn't believe in Buddhism as per the Buddha. He believed in Buddhism as per himself, which is not Buddhism, that is more Ambedkarism. But if you look at the actual Buddhism, you can't say that they were without Jati, caste, Jati, Varna, because they were. There are a lot of Buddhist texts where they are openly Kshatriya or openly something or other, but they are not free from these kind of identities. And then there is a whole lot of, we have evidence here on Muslim caste in India. A Muslim caste, actually, a famous author, Cambridge University Press, either that or it was Oxford University Press, I think, wrote this Muslim on the Muslim caste of India. And he was just totally cancelled. But so much data on how the upper caste Muslims are the ones getting all the quotas and whenever they give all this Farooq Abdullah and this Shabana Azmi, her husband, all these people, they're all upper caste Muslims. And they are the ones who are going around fighting for Islam and all that stuff. But the lower echelon of Muslims don't get any of that benefit. It's all these guys, the elitist Muslims, they are. And so there are lawsuits from Dalit Muslims against Islamic organizations in India saying that there is caste discrimination against us. This is Muslims. So these are things that we have to bring out. These are things we have to bring out. See, they are smart enough, they can find one person and convince him to go file a lawsuit and get so much mileage out of it. Why aren't we able to find such examples, have them file a lawsuit? And there are Dalit Christians. In fact, in many cemeteries in India, they won't allow a Dalit to be buried along with the Brahmins. Christians, all of them are Christians. And there is an official petition by the Christians in India, by the church in India, to the courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court, to recognize caste within Christianity and give them quotas. So it's an official position of theirs. So if you are wanting legal recognition that there is caste in order to get the quotas and the benefits, then on the other side you cannot go on claiming we don't have a caste system. And this is true in the Sikhs also. I mean, the Jat, the whole Khalistan problem is a Jat. It's the people who are behind the Khalistan movement are Jats only. And they have so much, they call it Jat. Jat is the Jati, So there is so much, they are so Jat conscious, these people. The Sikhs will tell you that. You talk to any Sikh, they'll say that our text says there should not be any caste discrimination, but in practice there is. In practice there is. So it's not what the book says, it's what the practice is. So then if you look at, we have a whole section on untouchability. Now you may think that what you've been told is that untouchability is there in India forever. But I'm telling you, and I prove it here, that until 1918, the term untouchability was not used. The term in the 1800s, which the Christians are using, the British are using, is something like deprived classes. They are people who are deprived, economically deprived. It is not anything else, but they're just poor people. And this goes on, and then what happens is the Maharaja of Baroda, Gaikwad, he's the first one who uses untouchableness, something like that, as a term. In his correspondence, he was corresponding with the British. He's very nationalistic and all, fine. But in his correspondence, he puts that in. And that doesn't catch on. And then, doesn't catch on right away. But then there is a 1918 event, some event about the underprivileged classes of people in India. And they put out a pamphlet in which they use the word untouchables. And that is like 100 years ago. That's it. That's when and I show you all this, that until then that was not considered, they were not considered untouchable per se. So if you ask me, okay, then why is it that they're not allowed to touch this, or they're not allowed to go here and there, even if the word untouchable wasn't there, but in practice, there is this taboo. So let me explain to you what it is. The restrictions were on, the modern term would be hygiene. It's a hygiene system that says somebody who's cutting meat is not hygienically qualified to touch the deity. Somebody who is into leather, or somebody who's done this or that kind of a thing, it's a system of pollution. It's all sort of like your actions and your profession kind of contaminate you in a way that it's not going to be good for you to go and do something else which requires a certain level of cleanliness. So it's a system of hygiene, and it is not originally by birth, it is by your profession. So we have many examples where parents may have been not hygienic and therefore not allowed to do certain things, but I may be fine and I'm able to do it. So it's more a system of hygiene. And I think the modern equivalent would be like, somebody has COVID and he's not supposed to do surgery. I mean, it's not untouchability, but I guess you could call it that he's an untouchable. He's a surgeon, now he's got COVID, he's not allowed to come and do surgery. Somebody who got radioactivity in a nuclear accident, he got radioactivity, then he has to be quarantined. So any system of quarantine on grounds of hygiene, on grounds of safety. So the Vedic system placed a lot of value on rituals. And these rituals required certain cleanliness, certain hygiene, certain protocols. And certain people, and people had to be qualified to do that. So whether you take your shoes off, whether it is you wear dhoti to come, whether it is you have to have a shower and you come, whatever the rules are, those are part of the prerequisites to make you capable of performing that ritual. Otherwise, you are bringing some kind of a pollutant. It's more like that. It's not that you are an untouchable and I can't sit and eat with you and those kind of things. That prejudice comes later. So you must understand what later becomes untouchability, or rather in recent centuries becomes untouchability, starts out as kind of protocols and procedures and restrictions of a very high standard of hygiene to perform rituals. So if certain people are not eligible to perform rituals because they're not Brahmins. Brahmins are the ones who've been sanctioned, they've been certified, they've gotten through the training and they've become this. It's not necessarily that your parents were Brahmin, you were Brahmin. Today everybody is saying my dad was Brahmin, I'm Brahmin, but most of them are violating the rules of Brahmins. It wasn't like that. You have to live a certain life to be a Brahmin. So if you look at the restrictions on each of the Varnas, the maximum restrictions are on the Brahmins. The restrictions that the Shudras will not go and do ritual, okay, but he can go and have a life, good life. He can go drinking. Brahmin can't drink. He can go and do all kind of lifestyle. Modern, according to the modern American lifestyle, the Dalits, the restrictions on the Brahmins are pretty oppressive. They should say very oppressive. The Brahmins are being oppressed by the restrictions on them. And the same restrictions do not apply to the Shudras. The Shudras can live a more American lifestyle than the Brahmins can if you are true to the tradition. The Brahmins can't accumulate wealth, which means all these Sundar Pichai and all these guys, they're not Brahmins because they're all making money. The Brahmins cannot have political power, which is meant for Kshatriyas. So you cannot run for office, you cannot be a politician, you cannot be a court judge. You know, the British, in order to populate the civil service with Indians, because they could not get enough Gora people coming from England to run the entire civil service, they needed a lot of brown people. They found that this required people who have book knowledge, who are good at learning and memorizing, and they found that these Brahmins were like that. So in the 1800s, it was decided, it was a policy debated in the British Parliament, decided that we should encourage Brahmins to become bureaucrats. And they'll make good bureaucrats because they follow the rules, they know how to memorize, they know they are rigid, they have rigor. So they have all these kind of disciplines. And now we will turn the British law into the new equivalent of the Vedas, the new Shastras, and the royal family and the viceroy and all those, the royal rulers and governor general as the new devatas, substitute that, raise a new generation of these people and turn them into bureaucrats and get rid of Sanskrit and teach them English, teach them British history, teach them all that stuff. And that Macaulay project turned out to be phenomenal for them. Within 1 or 2 generations, they turned the whole civil service from Goras, who they couldn't get enough of them, to Brahmins. Brahmins became the IAS officers. In those days, ICS officers, then IAS officers. But that is not a Brahmin's job. Brahmin is not supposed to be a bureaucrat, administrator. That is the Kshatriya's job. So the idea of, and then getting into accounting, these kind of fields, knowledge, kind of fields, getting Brahmins into it, is not what the Brahmin restrictions allow. So, you can't be half-baked and can't say, okay, we'll accept all that as Brahmin, okay, and we'll overlook that. And yet, when there's a problem against some person, we will say it's the Brahmin doing it to the Shudra. Because the real fact is that guy is neither a Brahmin in the true sense, and this guy is not a Shudra in the true sense. So the Varna separation and the Varna definition, there are a couple of points I'm making. First point I'm making, that the restrictions were there on every single Varna, not just against Shudras. And the restrictions on Shudras are probably the easiest because they are not allowed to do certain things which are ritualistic. But they have more freedom on personal lifestyle. The huge number of restrictions on Brahmins, what they're not allowed to do, including political power, not serve in the military, not serve in the judiciary, and certainly not accumulate money. So, and similarly, the Vaishya, who got the money, the trading, the business community, the industrialists, are not allowed to get into politics. So they're not supposed to go bribe somebody and get into Rajya Sabha. That is not what a Vaishya is supposed to do. You see, and they're not supposed to run for politics or become a scholar or something like that. So we are. First point I'm making is that in modern times, there's hardly anybody who is living true to a particular Varna. Second, the restrictions on these Varnas were not oppressive against Dalits per se. There were different restrictions for different people, and you could argue that maybe the Brahmins are the toughest ones because they're not allowed to make money, have power, all that stuff. And then third is that this business of birth-based was also not there. So when you look at all the misinformation that you are getting, you should be able to take some of the facts given here, because whatever I'm telling you is backed by references. I also have a whole chapter here looking at British records, which say that they have censuses saying how many people of various communities are in schools. And here they're showing the majority of students in many schools were Shudras. Fewer Brahmins, more Shudras. So it's not that they were not being educated; they're being educated. So this business that the education was discriminating against them is also not true, because this is as per their own records. These are all I'm quoting here and giving you all the references where you can go and find out in Madras Presidency and in Bengal and here and there. All these different examples are given. And then you have things, there are abuses throughout, and then there is reform from within, and then after a while there is some more shake-up, and society keeps going through polarization where camps develop and they are trying to hold on to power or privilege over other people, and it's not based on the same thing as Varna Jati, it's just opportunism. So if you are a Patel, I remember that 25, 30 years ago, a relative of mine who's Gujarati, her brother came from India, and he was sitting here and he was very relaxed. I said, what are you going to do? He said, I don't know, I'll just go get a motel. I said, how do you get a motel? He didn't have any money. He said, no, we have a system. I just go and they'll give me the money. They'll tell me this is a motel. I'll own the motel. They'll teach me everything. So I could say that's a privilege I don't have. That is true. But the Patels are listed as OBCs, other backward caste. So it has nothing to do with the Vedic hierarchy. I mean, that's a community that worked very hard. They looked after each other. And it's like Koreans own most of the laundromats. It's not like there's a laundromat caste system or something in the United States. It's not that the United States said this is a Korean caste job. It's just that they did that. I mean, most of the Indian-owned gas stations are Sikhs. There is no caste system that says, gas station belongs to Sikhs, but that's how it turned out. So communities have always had this tendency to look after each other. It's just opportunism. Now, if tomorrow AI, artificial intelligence, wipes out the programming jobs, then all these tech people will become low caste. They'll become unemployed. And you'll suddenly have, when I used to say this 15, 20 years ago, they didn't believe it. Today they at least believe it. That, it's possible, maybe. We did 14 volumes we published on the history of Indian science and technology, Infinity Foundation. And one of the things I always wanted these guys to look at is a particular community that were doing something like metallurgy or civil engineering. What were they as per today's caste? How would they be classified? And one of the examples we found is zinc. Zinc is a metal. And the distillation of zinc was first done in India. This is recognized by there is a European Association of Metallurgists, and they recognized this, and they went to this place in Rajasthan. We did all this research and all, and they put a huge plaque saying that this is the world's first place known where zinc was successfully distilled. 400-500 years before Europeans could distill it. This was considered a very big breakthrough in metallurgy, because if you can distill a metal, means you've turned the solid into gas, and then condensed it again into pure. Now you have, without any impurities, you have that substance pure. And so you can make formulas, mixing alloys with perfection, absolute precise perfection. So this distillation of zinc was such a huge product that India had a monopoly on exporting zinc. And so they've done all this research on how much money they're making. Some of these villages and these communities, they were making tons of money because there was a huge demand for this purified zinc, because you could make different kinds of bronze and whatnot. So when you look at their so-called caste as per today, they're all today's Shudras. These guys were artisans, and this was a technology that they developed through their trial and error experimentation. This is all written. We have all history of zinc metallurgy, and you will see all the references there. So some of these, in those days, those were like IT workers today. The zinc metallurgists were like today's IT workers. This is before the Industrial Revolution, when they replaced all this with the mechanization of metallurgy. Before the metallurgy of zinc became mechanized and put these people out of business, they were, for several centuries, very rich people, because they had a certain product, and that product was very expensive in the market, and they had a monopoly on it, and they were very rich. So that rise of that community and the fall of that community was part of the economics. I mean, if petroleum becomes $5 a barrel of oil, then the Jati of Arabs will become back to the camels. They'll go back riding camels and all that stuff, because that product made them rich. So similarly, today I'll tell you, if the AI wipes out the programming and software and all this kind of thing, large number, millions and millions of, tens of millions of Indians will be considered underprivileged and things like that. So the point I'm making here is that the mobility is not fixed and frozen as per your designation in the Vedic sense. It's a free market where people are moving up and moving down, and they're enterprising, and they make a community, and they go after market share from other communities. That's life. That's how it is. So then there is this whole business about how the British, it's very interesting when the British came and they wanted to, 250 years after they arrived, because they arrived in the year 1600. The East India Company was made in the year 1600. And that's before the British landed in America. Before the Pilgrims came to America, they had made East India Company. So they were going in both directions. So when 250 years after that, Lord Risley comes and he starts this census business. And his person, Professor Simon Charsley, anthropologist at the University of Glasgow, explains how they struggled to make all the Indians fit into their idea of caste. And they are saying that it is very difficult to identify who is who, which caste he belongs to, and where that caste is. And sometimes a delegation would come from a certain community, a certain caste community, saying that we don't belong in this, please, we belong in that. And so they would make a petition, and they write a complaint that you are misclassifying us. All this went on for a long time. And then there's another Cambridge anthropologist who says, until well into the colonial period, much of the subcontinent was still populated by people for whom the formal distinctions of caste were of only limited importance, even in parts of the so-called Hindu heartland. The institutions and beliefs which are now often described as the elements of traditional caste were only just taking shape as recently as the 18th century under British influence. This is very important. So then, you see, I have quoted all these kind of people. So it is very useful for you. You can pull all this stuff out of it. And then it is this Gaikwad, Maharaja of Baroda, who then uses the term depressed classes, that the British were calling them depressed classes, people, whoever is below a poverty line. And then they are the ones who gradually, somebody introduced the term untouchableness, and he liked that. And so the first use in a written was this anti-untouchability manifesto that came out in 1918 by the Indian side, not the British side. So this we accepted this, we accepted that we have this untouchability, and that's how we started this problem. So that's the whole social engineering done by our own people. I mean the British people, but our elites collaborated. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll just leave it here. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I want to talk about Ambedkar. I think this is an important thing. Ambedkar wrote 4 important books, and I've analyzed each of them. And imagine taking hundreds of pages of a book, very heavy-duty book, and taking all his 4 books and summarizing it in 20 pages. That's a lot of work. I mean, I've done this helping you guys. I'm told I'm writing heavy, large books, not easy to read, but I'm condensing it 100 to 1 in terms of 100 pages are put into one. So if a book has got 800 pages, you can imagine how many thousands of pages I had to read to do that. And you can see from the references and the bibliography, there's a lot of material there. So I'll tell you what are the 4 important books. So you'll have a basic talking knowledge about Ambedkar when you talk about Ambedkar. So the first book is against the caste system, and he rejects Hinduism as a casteist. Now this is also very interesting, because he, even after rejecting, he says that to build a new social structure, the Hindus don't need to go outside to Islam or Christianity. He's very clear. Because the Upanishads contain the answers. So he's saying that you guys got it wrong because of Dharma Shastras, but you guys can get it right with your own Upanishads. So that's a very interesting nuance. You have to, he says your problem is, you have a problem, but you also got a solution. He was very clear. He did not want the Hindus to go and become Christians or Muslims. He's very clear. And then the other, and another important point that I make is, part of his reason for being very upset had to do with Gandhi. I don't know how many of you know this, but he had a big fight with Gandhi. There was a Hindu gathering. Gandhi was the leader, and they were going to talk about how to upgrade the social groups that were not doing well, underprivileged. And they wanted him, as a person fighting for those people, to come and give the keynote address. Something very strange happened, which is unfortunate. I wish it hadn't happened. They told him not to criticize. Like I face this also. So you go to some RSS meeting, they say, don't talk criticism. I want to talk criticism. What's wrong? I'm not against anybody. This is my style. I like to be critical. So he's an intellectual. He just come back from Columbia University. He got his PhD under John Dewey, famous guy. He's a smart guy. He's an intellectual. You can't go to a guy like that and tell him that you can't criticize Hindus. So this is the note that he was given, and according to this account. And they wanted him to see his notes, his talk beforehand. Now that's an insult. I mean, I've turned down if they ever say we want to see your keynote address before we let you speak. I actually, to hell with you. So he was very ticked off. He refused to go, and he published his speech, but made it tougher than it would have been. And that speech is that is the speech where he rejects Hinduism wholeheartedly. Until then, he was against it, he was criticizing it, he was also, he was just a critic of things in general. But that showdown with Gandhi. Then Gandhi wrote a rebuttal to his speech and published it in one of the magazines that Gandhi was running. And then Ambedkar wrote a rebuttal to that rebuttal. So that's how the war started, between these two guys. So this is an important point that you should know. Not that he was accepting Hindu dharma, he was not, but he was also a critic of Islam. If you look at, this is the second book on Islam. He writes about the partition of Pakistan and why it's happening, what's wrong with Islam. And he blames Islam for everything. If you remove the name Ambedkar, from his writings and just publish. They'll ban you, they'll prosecute you, they'll sue you for being Islamophobic. He was an Islamophobic. I mean, I've given passages, 50, 60 passages of Ambedkar to a lot of scholars and said, what do you think of this? They say, oh, this guy, and they get very angry. I tell them that this is Ambedkar. And they find it hard to believe. But you should know these things. And you should have such verses in your hip pocket so that you should have it in your phone. You say, okay, this one, what do you think? Who wrote this? And they will not believe that this is Ambedkar. He was also against Christianity. He felt that Indians, the lower caste, he coined the term Dalit for them, and he said that they should not either convert to Islam or to Christianity. Very interesting. He also had a big fight with communism. That's the third book of his. He wrote a book where he compared Buddhism with communism. And he says that communism is inherently violent and whatnot and whatnot. So today's woke people who are bringing Dalits in as sort of the fighters on their side, they are bringing together the leftist, communist, Marxists, and the Islamic people, the Dalits, all the people who are angry, bringing them together. You need to go to them and tell them that Ambedkar, the father of this whole Dalit movement, rejected communism and rejected Islam. I mean, if you were to, you really need to know how to play them one against the other. We Hindus don't do that, but you have to learn how to do that. It takes some courage, it takes some risk, but you have to learn how to do that. You should be able to go to a woke gathering and tell them that I'm going to read out from Ambedkar, and those of you who think he's Islamophobic, please go protest against him. And I'll read out what he said about communism. These are things that our people should know about. Now I'll tell you the fourth one, which is his book on Buddhism. Now, very interestingly, he's mixed up. He rejects the most essential parts of Buddhism. He rejects reincarnation, imagine. He rejects karma theory, okay? And he does not believe in meditation, okay? And he does not believe in the nirvana as a higher state. He wants to reinvent Buddhism as a social doctrine, only social doctrine, nothing spiritual, only social activism. But by the time he's done changing Buddhism for his social crusade, or a social, that's the wrong word, but the social campaign, it's hardly recognizable as Buddhism. It's just called Buddhism. In fact, if you take his text and go show it to Dalai Lama's people or any Buddhist organization, they'll say this is not Buddhism. Now, the biggest problem in the area of caste system, if you were to think of caste as groups of privileges that stick together, help each other, and others are underprivileged, I think the biggest problem today, which is of this kind, is not even being recognized. I've written about it for a while, and I call it the digital caste system. The digital caste system. This is the caste system being enforced by digital media and AI. This is a system of people who are in control of our thinking through the AI as a censoring mechanism, as a filtering mechanism, as a watchdog, as a policeman, as somebody who will rate, what is your rating as per your DEI performance, as an individual, as an organization, as an institution, as anything. What is your rating in terms of how ESG friendly you are? The values of certain people, certain elite people, are being used to train these algorithms to go and review all the posts you've ever made in your life, all the pictures. So if Mukesh Ambani is seen shaking hands with mostly upper caste people and hardly ever a lower caste person, his caste rating go down, because this AI recognition system will say that out of so many people he shook hands with and so many events he attended, wedding events and so on, it was a disproportionately low representation of low caste people that he hugged and we shook hand and all that stuff. And that will be, that this is an automatic AI system rating that can just come out like that. This is where the world is going. And you may think that this is all far-fetched, but India has picked up DEI like nobody else. In India, there is this organization in the US called SHRM. They do this HR training. And if you know anybody who's into HR, I have one of my relatives' kids is an HR person, and she tells me that to get ahead in HR, you need to get certified, keep taking their courses and get certified, and then it's considered good. And at a certain level, they're indoctrinating you with this whole DEI thing. And what they are doing is creating an entire sleeper cell network of DEI trained people with their ideology. They're putting them in governments, in universities, in industry, everywhere they're putting them. And these people are all like one alumni. They all know each other. They read the same books. They watch the same, training videos, and they can be activated very quickly. So once this caste thing happens, they feel, once this caste thing happens and becomes like legal, this will be activated so fast. Through this DEI mechanism, this will be activated so fast. You may suddenly find that basic things that you were entitled to, you took for granted, are no longer available. No longer available. And I don't want to disclose certain very personal things, but I have, for the last 2 years, been the subject of serious attack that affects my personal life, with no due process available from organizations, not one. First one I thought maybe some biased person trying to dump on me, but 2 of them now, exceedingly big name organizations, very powerful, which can actually have a huge harmful effect on me. And the reason I don't want to share it is not only because it's embarrassing, but actually it'll make it worse, because it'll actually give the idea to many others to do this, to attack on this basis. And nobody's going to help me. Nobody's going to help me if I were to say, okay, now here's my problem. You all hug me emotionally, give me some samosa, hug me and all this stuff. But nobody's going to help me. I'm on my own. So since I'm on my own, I know that by complaining, I'll only make it worse. But I shared this with somebody, and he told me that he's having a similar problem. So these problems are happening. These problems are happening, so I am also learning how to combat it for myself, because I need to do that. The situation is coming where, the law may not work for you. The law may not work for you, because there are different standards of law. The laws are being applied against certain people for trivial matters. I mean, this is happening in the political world also. Out of context, never been applied like that in that situation. And others are getting a free pass. Juries, very highly, New Jersey is one of those places where I hope none of you get into a situation where you're defending yourself in front of a jury, but it may not be that friendly towards Hindus, because the basic premise is that you are basically racist people. And that stigma of being racist, we are not as lucky as the Jews. The Jews are in bad shape, but they got people like Bill Ackman, who will fight back, and 100 other people. I know a lot of Jews, and they have enough people who go fight back to the hell with you. We don't have that. You're on your own. If the same thing happened, if tomorrow, let's say the same thing that's happened to the Jews were happening to Hindus. Let's say some Muslim group, just like Hamas, but some Muslim group in India attacks some big Hindu thing. And they capture, they torture, they do all kind of bad things. And so there is a retaliation. Like the Israeli army, there is a retaliation against these guys. It will also become an international event. There will be marches in downtowns in front of all kind of state houses and in campuses. But the difference will be that unlike the Jews fighting back, there will be nobody from our side wanting to fight back. We'll have this business that, I'm looking after myself. Mandirs will say, no, I don't want controversy. That's true. One of the most famous and wealthiest Hindu temples, and all of you know, but I won't name, invited me in England when I was there. Fantastic hosts in a gathering like this, fantastic discussions, They said, we need to pick your brain. We are having all these problems. It's all, attacks on us, this, that, whatever. I did all that. Very lively Q&A. The moment that video came up, and he knows, I got this thing saying, no, turn it down, turn it off. We don't want, it is private. We can't let anybody know. I said, come on. This should go out so that many more Hindus get the idea how to fight back. They said, no, because we got some information that from some government or whatever, that we'll become a bigger target. We'll become a bigger target. So this business that we're suffering, but we better not complain. Because if you complain, it's going to get even worse for you. And then there is this Scotland. Scotland is pretty bad shape. Because she invited Subramanian Swamy to give a talk. She was asked to resign. So she can't even decide which speaker of her religion she can invite. Now, I'm not saying Subramanian Swamy is a good guy. He has plenty of problems with him, controversial, whatever. That is his life. It has nothing to do with it. And whatever he's doing, I don't agree with. But from the point of view of the Hindu community deciding who to invite, it's their business. Nobody just tells the Muslim person which imam to invite and which imam not to invite. Nobody tells the Christian, nobody tells anybody else who their speakers are. So just for inviting a person they didn't agree with, she has to resign from being the representative of Hindus. So now they are going to decide who will speak for you. They will decide, they will appoint who your Hindu leader is. Now that's pretty bad. So now this person comes to me and says, now I need all your help, this, that, but don't tell anybody, don't record, And I gave so many workshops off camera because I was told that we are afraid of things getting even worse. So things are not that great for us. So I'll finish off, but I just want to say this. I would like each of you to do this, something with this, something more than just sit and listen. Each of you should either write a piece, whether it's 5 pages or 20 pages, doesn't matter, but some piece on any one issue that you pick up from here, any one issue, just go through it and give your thoughts on it, give your reflections on it, and try to post it online, try to post it in a newspaper, try to give a talk in a school, but do something with it. I would really like each of you to take any topic of this on any aspect. Could be historical, could be current, could be giving a rebuttal on this issue or that issue, but something that you use from here, even if it's just 5 pages worth. So I would like each of you to do that. Second idea is do something practical. The first one is something theoretical, so your ideas crystallize and you become more solid. The second idea is practical, meaning that I want you to either go get into a petition of some kind, and Nikunj has plenty of important things like that, or go to an organization, go to a school. If your kids go to school and say, I like to talk about Hindu dharma and refute some common Hindu-phobic views, or go to a local radio station, or do something. In other words, get out of your comfort zone. Stick your neck out. Stick your neck out. Well, we need more people. Now it's so encouraging after 30 years of doing this. I find that at least 100 people can gather and talk openly. That's very good. But we need people to get out of the comfort zone and of like-minded people, get out into the mainstream where they may not even agree with you, and learn how to hit back, how to fight back, how to argue your point. That's what I would really like to see. So this year, we're celebrating our 30th anniversary of the Infinity Foundation, and Nikunj is part of our thinking, and we have, I'm very glad, Devendra Singh ji he's on the one of the trustees of our foundation. So we are going to do several events, and we'll keep in touch with you guys. So thank you very much for listening, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you. Namaste.